Welcome, everyone. My name is Chelsea Baldwin. This is the Future Proof Leader podcast. I'm the co-founder of Twin Legacy Solutions, where we automate your pipeline, elevate your leaders, and future-proof your teams. Today, we have a really unique and exciting guest with us. So John Bates, he's the CEO of Executive Speaking Success. He has a really interesting background working with astronauts and NASA and Fortune 500 companies. So I think that he's definitely going to bring some exciting perspective to this topic today. And this is kind of our open-ended topic where we bring in executives and we just learn about your story, right? People love hearing about successful people's stories and journeys and what got you there. What are maybe some lessons learned the hard way so that others can learn from those as we go, right? So thank you so much, John, for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time. I think if we could kick it off, just tell us about yourself and what your business does.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story about that because I think it answers a lot of questions. I was always the guy with the soft skills, and I always worked with a lot of people with the hard skills because I started in the .com arena way back in 1994. And I was always a founder, a co-founder, or an early stage employee at these .com companies. And I raised several $100 million with my teams in Silicon Valley and outside Silicon Valley. But the people that I was essentially paying would say, "Oh, John, he does the fluffy stuff." And so I went around with this secret chip on my shoulder, not feeling like I was valuable, thinking they were more valuable, and it was just awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward to all the way to 2009 when I went to the TED conference for the first time, and I just saw person after person give the most unbelievable talks
Yeah.
I'd ever seen. And I was like, oh, wow, like that is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Call it fluffy if you will, but that's powerful. And so for the first time in my life, I really got a sense that what I brought was powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the very same time though, I was like, oh, dude, like I have always thought I was such a good speaker, right? I went around kind of puffing my chest out about being the best speaker around. And then I realized, oh, that's because I was speaking at tech conferences, right? Like I was the best of the worst. And at that moment at TED, I was like, wow, okay, maybe I am better than a lot of the people around me, but that's not saying much. What if I really went for being as good as I could be as a speaker, as a communicator, all of that. And so I jumped into the TED and TEDx community. And at one of the first ever TEDx events, I was there working on it with my friends who had invited me to volunteer for it. And we had this guy who had all the hard skills in the world and he had the most exciting topic. And I was waiting for him all day. And when he got up on stage and started to speak, everybody in the room just checked out because he was so
Yeah.
nervous and awkward. We thought we were going to throw up for him, right? And so at first I was really sad because genuinely I'd been waiting for him all day. And
Mm-hmm.
then I got mad because I thought about what that must have cost my companies to
Mm.
have people like that on the team who were brilliant but couldn't communicate. And then the evil part of me popped out, and I sat in the back going, ah, ha, 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 hard skills guys blowing it, calls what I do fluffy, neener. And as I was doing that, my buddy came over and he leaned down and he said, dude, we got to do something to help people like this. And that was the moment that completely, utterly, totally transformed my life. I went
Mm-hmm.
home that night. I ditched the chip on my shoulder. I started working on the training I now do all over the world. And like you said, I got to train all the active NASA astronauts. I've now gotten 2 calls from the space station.
Wow.
You know,
That's
I mean, like I pinch myself about all of this, but what I did differently that I think made that happen is I based everything I could as much as possible in human evolutionary biology and human neurophysiology so I could show people not
Mhm.
only what works, but also why it works based in science. And that just changed everything for me because that turns out to be super successful. And word spread that I could actually really make a difference with these hard skills people who were maybe
Right.
not the best communicators. And that just blew up for me, knock on wood and thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is about that whole thing is that when it comes to being a future proof leader, I think one of the most important things to remember, because I think it's one of the easiest things to forget, is that we are anatomically human. We are not machines. Even if AI gets really good, and even if what we're dealing with all day is computers, human beings are not computers. And one of my main sayings is that communicating with human beings is not logical.
Hmm.
You may have noticed, right? It's not logical, it's biological. And when you understand the biology, you can make it logical again. But if you go in thinking logic by itself should win, you just never be very influential or effective with human beings.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. Well, funny that you bring up AI because that is something this conversation always ends up talking about AI at some
Yeah,
point.
well, future, right? I mean, it's
Right,
on all our minds. It's the
exactly.
future's here now, right?
It is, yeah. So you work with a lot of senior executives, I would imagine.
Tons, yeah.
Right. With that, group of individuals, right? So high level companies, Fortune 500s, what are the walls that they're hitting, right? Like what are you seeing? What trends are you seeing out there right now as we are entering 2026? And what can we do to get ahead of those?
Well, I mean, one trend that I see is that to really get to the highest levels of leadership in those companies, you need to be good with people. And I
Hmm.
mean, that's obviously on some level self-serving for me to say that, but it's also just flat out true.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, that is the thing that I see getting in the way the most. And the woman who ran HR for all of Intuit, the big global company, she said something when we were talking one time that really stood out for me. She said, John, well, I was working with an executive that they wanted to put into the C-suite from the VP level.
Hmm.
And was super good at his job. People really loved working for him. People really loved working with him. Like all checked all those boxes. And he held his cards really close to his chest,
Hmm.
wasn't the best public presenter, didn't share anything about himself. And she said, here's the pithy line: people want to know their leaders.
Hmm.
And so, that's one place where I see people getting stalled. Now, that being said, there's all kinds of things we could talk about.
Right.
How do how do big companies, because I'm really sympathetic to working from home. I work from home. I don't
Mhm.
want to go to an office. I love working from home.
Yeah.
But I'm a small little operation. How do people at these bigger operations, how do they bring people in who are new, who are young people, and train them and get them socialized into the company and have them make connections and friends, because that's how it all works.
Mhm.
So I think that's one thing that's very frustrating to a lot of organizations. And they, like, everybody wants to work from home. They want to be wherever they want to be in the world, but how do they have a strong company culture? How do they have good internally connected people? How do they train the new people? So that's a really big um, problem for a lot of companies. And one thing that I see happening more and more is just bringing people together. Maybe you're not
Yeah.
spending as much on real estate and office space anymore. Take that money and put it into quarterly or twice a year retreats where you get everybody together and you really spend some time on the human side of work and getting to know each other. And, I get brought in a lot to do a day at those kinds of things where people share their origin stories and people learn some of the techniques of leadership communication. And the whole goal of that is deeper connection. So it turns out to be really good team building and a really fun, interesting, human, deep connection. And then once you do a day of that, you can do another day of work. And what
Mhm.
are we all, and everything goes a lot better if people get together sometimes still in person.
Yeah, and it is hard to do. And I've worked at a lot of the 500 companies, right? And some of them are great at that type of employee engagement, and
Yeah.
some don't want to spend money on it at all, right? And it's one of those that, I actually was just reading an article on that recently of what are these big companies investing in 2026?
Yeah.
And of course, AI is on there, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be on there. But retention and people talent, that was next. That was in there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
they go hand in hand, right? So people want to work at companies that are investing in AI and are cutting edge, and they want to learn it for themselves too, so that they
Yep.
stay up to speed. But they also want to know that their companies care about them and are investing in them. So
Well,
I
that's
I
one of the
see. Yeah.
big things, right? Like companies that invest in their employees, and I think it's smart to invest in your people, and then I think it's also reasonably smart to say, "Hey, we care about you. We're
Yeah.
investing in you. So here's what we're doing. Here's what you're gonna get," you
Right.
know?
That's how you
And
retain.
yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely. So kind of taking a little step back and looking more at your journey, I think, which is really interesting. Can you talk about just that journey and anytime you talk to an entrepreneur, they describe it as a roller coaster, right? There's a lot of the highs are really high, the lows are really
yeah,
low. How do you survive the lows, right? There's people that are in those lows now, and
yeah,
they're wondering, should I go back to my corporate 500 job,
yeah.
or keep pushing through? So what advice do you have for that?
Well, I so I had a bunch of .com companies, raised several $100 million, never had a brilliantly successful exit. So, I don't have my own private island or anything. Um, And
Yeah.
when I lost my company, bigwords.com, I was one of four co-founders. We raised over $80 million in the .com crash. Our investors came and they were very kind. They said, "Look, you guys did a good job. You grew while you were growing market share, and you were the best marketers in the whole space on a shoestring. You spent nothing close to what your competitors spent, but we don't think you're going to be profitable fast enough, and the market has changed, so we're pulling the plug."
Mm,
And I went into a corner and was so embarrassed and sad and angry and hurt that I almost died of
mm.
an autoimmune disease.
Oh my
And
gosh.
while I was sitting in the hospital thinking I was going to die, I had this conversation with the universe, because as I looked at my life, as one does, I was like, okay, this has been fun, but it's been really small and selfish, like I'm going to succeed. And yes, I'll take you with me, but it's about me. And I said, I don't want that to be the way I go out. So please, if you let me live, if you let me walk out of here, like I will make sure that my number one goal from now on will be to make a difference, and
Mhm.
everything else will be secondary. And I actually did that. I kept that promise because I got to walk out, and I was not okay for a while. Like it took,
Yeah.
a while to recover from that. But um, ever since then, I have kept that promise, and it really changed things. And I remember when I started doing what I'm doing now,
Mhm.
I had been in the wilderness for quite a while. I like that. Big Words went under in like 2000, and I had a couple of really cool things I did in between, but it was 2009 when I went to TED. And in about 2010 or so, 2011, I was doing this, but on the side, kind of, for beer money and fun. And finally, like everything that else that I had dried up. And they say burn the boats, right? So you have no
Yeah.
excuse to go back and you have to win. Well,
Mhm.
I didn't have courage to set the boats on fire, but
Mhm.
when they caught on fire and I couldn't put them out, it was like I burned the boats. And so I had to figure out what to do. And for a while, I sat there and I thought, I don't have any real skills, because, like, I did anything. Like, if I had to run customer service, I ran customer service. If I had to sweep the floor, I swept the floor. If I had to, shampoo the carpets and no one else would do it, I'll do it. So,
Mhm.
like, I had done everything, but I hadn't really gotten good at anything.
Yeah.
And then it dawned on me, oh, but I've been a public speaker this whole time, and I do like working with people on that. And I've helped a lot of people with that. maybe I should become a speaking coach, you know?
Mhm.
So I told my friends who would know, like people in the PR industry and other people who would be the kind to hire me. And they're like, oh, you don't want to be a speaker coach. Like they're a dime a dozen. Like you'll never make any money. And like,
Mm.
don't do that. So for a month or so, I cried about it and tried to think of something else and couldn't think of
Mhm.
anything else. And so I finally said, okay, I'm just going to do it. But here was the big breakthrough for me. I was crying about it because I wanted to make some money, you know? And they're all like, yeah, you'll never make any money there, a dime a dozen, right? And I was like, okay, well, you know what? Screw it. I know that I have made a difference for people doing this. And I know I provide value with this.
Mhm.
I'm just going to do it anyway. Let money be damned. I'm going to do this because I know it makes a difference and I
Yeah.
know it provides value. And the first year of doing this, I went further in debt and I was
Mm.
already 50 grand plus in, and I went even further. Then the second year, I almost broke even. And the third year, I made more than I ever made in my entire life, even in
Wow.
Silicon Valley. And then the fourth year, I doubled that plus. And then
Mm.
the fifth year, I tripled that plus, right? And I was like, oh, this is what they mean when they say provide value. Focus on providing value. Because when I was focused on making money, I had debt. But when I
Mhm.
shifted the focus a little, it doesn't mean I didn't want to make money. I was focused on making money, but my main focus was providing value.
Right.
And when I did that, it wasn't overnight, but something happened, you know.
Yeah.
Does that land?
Yeah, I love that. And that almost, I mean, I think a 3 to 5 year scale like that is overnight when you're thinking of it today.
Yeah, I mean,
My
yeah.
goodness, that's fast.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite sayings, I always tell my brother this because he's got a successful software company. I remember he came to me and was like, oh my gosh, dude, we're like, and he was making a lot of money and things were just going bonkers. And I said, well, dude, it's easy to be an overnight success when you've been doing something for 10 years because
Sure.
he had been, and they just hit this inflection point.
Yeah, I love that. That's so during that scaling period, because that's a whole challenge in itself when you're scaling
Sure
at that
is.
pace. How did you juggle that? That was such a rapid growth.
Yeah. Well, luckily I had just gotten married and my wife is the freaking bomb. And I never, ever really got how 1 plus 1 is just way more than two.
Yeah.
But because I married the right person and because she was really committed to me and um you know was committed to what the business was up to, that just I mean that's how I did it, right? Like she just helped me make that happen, right?
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, I mean, and we kind of took traditional roles, which is, we decided that on purpose. So
Yeah.
like I just worked my butt off and she
Mhm.
did everything else,
Okay.
and then she would help me with produce my events some and things like that. But that was a big huge piece, right? Like I
Mhm.
definitely am never going to ever be one of those techno jerks who says I did it myself, because no
Yeah.
one does it themselves, and I definitely didn't do it
Not
myself.
at that scale, especially. Yeah.
Yeah. And we didn't have our son yet. So we didn't have kids to worry about or anything. I was just heads down, totally all the time focused. And for people who are listening, if you haven't gotten to the point where you have an assistant yet or somebody, even a VA or anything, that was also a just an unbelievable unlock moment,
Mm.
because I tried a few times, but I wasn't willing to put the time in to train someone
Yeah.
to be my
Right.
VA because, oh, well, I could do this in like 2 minutes and it's going to take me at least 15 to explain it to them. But then one day it finally dawned on me that if I did this one time for 15 minutes, that's just a lifetime of 2 minutes that I am not spending doing that.
Mhm.
So I finally tried again and really dug in with the woman who I hired. Her name was Lay. And uh, I invested my time and my attention in her,
Mhm.
and she just helped me transform things, you know.
Love that.
And so that was also another big breakthrough and unlock.
Yeah,
And then
I could definitely relate with that.
yeah, I mean
Yeah,
it's worth doing, but
it
you
is.
got to be willing to put the time in to do it right.
Exactly. And like you said, if it is so much faster, right? To just, I could do this myself. I know what needs to be done, but learning to delegate it's a tough skill to learn. And I'm sure with the leaders that you work with, I'm sure by the time they're at that level, they've figured it out. But along
Yeah.
that journey, you got to figure out how to delegate, train, and so you can focus on what you do best and they focus on what they do best. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Do you know a guy named Mike Michalowicz? Have you ever heard of him? He's a business author.
No, I don't.
Okay, so the first book that I totally recommend anybody in a business has to read is Profit First.
Okay.
And it's not what it sounds like. It's not profit over everything else. There's a very clever reason it's called Profit First. I'll let you discover it yourself,
Okay.
but it is an absolute must read. And then he wrote another one where he's written several, you know, many really good business books for small to medium enterprises, especially. But I think it's called Clockwork,
Okay.
where he talks about how you need to identify what is your queen bee skill, like what
Mm.
is that one thing you do, and that you love to do, that you're good at, that's the value you provide, and then offload everything else.
Yeah.
And you know, that's
Yep.
how people succeed at business.
I believe you. Well, John, as we start to wrap up here, there's so much I would love to learn more about your background and journey, especially working with astronauts and NASA, but I know time is always of the essence. But as we wrap it up, I would love if you could just kick us off with a final advice for 2026, right? So small, medium business owners that are listening to this today, what should they be focusing on this year?
Well, okay, so you've got all the business things that you know better about than I do about your business and all that kind of stuff. I think that to be really, really successful in 2026, and I think that it will be honestly a differentiating factor between you and at least some of your competition. Focus on making that human connection with every human that matters to you and your business, like your employees, your customers, your suppliers, you know, all of them. Somehow focus with them. And, you know, I mean, if you maybe you could cut this out if you don't want this, but like, I've got two documents about creating two short PDFs that combined can help people create what I think is the most important tool any leader or business owner could have, which I call a well-crafted, well-chosen, well-delivered origin story.
Mm,
And at the beginning, I shared my origin story.
mhm,
And I think it sets people up to know something about me and see an insight into who I am and know what to expect from me a little better. And when people have great origin stories and they share them, you know, go find your origin story and share it with your employees, and go find your origin story and share it with your suppliers and your clients, and let them know why you care so much about what you do. Because if you didn't care about it a lot, you wouldn't be doing this. You wouldn't be working this hard, right? You
mhm,
wouldn't be listening to this right now, trying to get an edge and you know, take the next level. You care so much, but people don't know about that, and they don't know
mhm,
why, and they don't know where it came from. And when you share that, it's just transformational. It establishes what I call your emotional credibility, which
mhm.
I think that if people focused on their emotional credibility in 2026 and established that with their teams and their clients and everything, it would be transformational for them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I've seen it as well in our own business, right?
Yeah,
So many of our clients hire us because they say it's related to you guys. Like we
yep.
trust you guys. There's a million competitors
Bingo.
out there, like you said, dime a dozen, right?
Yeah.
But nothing is not nothing, but there's very few businesses that are totally unique anymore, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of competitors out there, so that's a great way to differentiate yourself is
Yeah.
be a human,
Be
right?
a human.
Be a
Yeah.
human. All right. Well, John, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. If anyone wants to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Uh, johnbates.com is easy to remember. Executive Speaking Success takes a little longer to type, but it goes more in depth on my coaching business. I think a great place to get a lot of my content that I work really hard on is linkedin.com and /in/ John Bates, just JOHNBATES. And so that, if people are excited or interested in establishing their emotional credibility, find me on linkedin.com and I talk about it a lot there. You can DM me, I'll send you the origin story documents. Love to hear if this makes a difference for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John, and best of luck this year.
Thank you. It was great to be here with you.